What's going on, passionate Pokemon players? I am Ryan, and we are here with another episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Today, we're going through another fun deck. As always, what decks aren't fun that I do here? This one is going to be the Alakazam Ex. This is a pretty cool deck. It's fun in many ways, but my first iteration of this deck I made about maybe actually more than 6 months ago, because it was right before rotation happened. So this was probably around March of this year, 2024. This is coming out in January 2025. So anyway, the deck just didn't work. It was a fun deck. It was using Mimikyu to kind of hang out with Alakazam on the bench, hitting from the bench with Dimensional Hand, but just wasn't dealing enough damage, and Mimikyu was rather easy to get around. But this time I've revamped it and I've added poison to the mix, so that we're going to be working with poison to increase damage and to give us a little bit more flexibility to not just have to keep Mimikyu out there and active. So I think it works. It's done pretty well on TCG Live. I've won a good amount of matches with it, so let's see if you'll like it. Hopefully you will. So we're going to overview the deck this time, each card, why I have each card in there. Then we'll talk about strengths, weaknesses, and strategy for the deck. And then we'll go through at the end of some other cards you may consider swapping into this deck. If you want to see what this deck is like in action, make sure you stick around for the next video, which will drop on Friday. And on that one, we'll actually take it to TCG Live. We'll go right into some matches online. But before we get into all of that demo, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you can join the Hawks Nest. Become part of a fabulous flock of folks who just love to do what we love, who are passionate about doing what we love well. Not just doing it, but doing it well. I'm passionate about these crazy rogue decks and making them at least competitive. I know there aren't meta, but at least competitive. Have some fun at your local. So, without further ado, let's get into what this deck is about. Alright, we have it up here, so let's talk about the Pokemon in the deck. First off, as you saw, we have Alakazam EX. Of course, we have 4 of these bad boys in here in the deck. This is our really main damage dealer, right? He's going to be doing our damage. So, of course, we have in here 4 Abras. Not too particular about which Abra we want. Maybe you'll want one that has teleport so you can get it out of the active. I don't know. Kadabra, I do like this Kadabra. In fact, I only have one of them, and I kind of would like to think about maybe incorporating a second one just in case. And the reason I like this one is if you do get caught with him in the active spot, his psychic move for 1 energy is pretty solid. That does 30 more for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon. It's actually kind of gotten me out of a few binds recently, because it can do a decent amount of damage. But if they just have 2, it's going to hit for 70, which a lot of times I'm finding those are the ones that maybe have their own Mimikyu up there or things of that nature. So this one, I like this Kadabra a lot. For that, I'd like to get a second one, but for now we just have the one. Of course, these you could choose whichever you want. There's a regular 151, and then this one's our nice little shiny Alakazam in there. Then we have Mimikyu. I initially played with 4 Mimikyus. We went down to 2. And safeguard preventing all damage done to this Pokemon by EX or Vs. So in an ideal world, your opponent is playing pure EXs and Vs, and they're not going to be able to hit you if you keep the Mimikyu inactive. Obviously, they're going to be able to do things like Boss, Prime Catcher, Counter Catcher, and things like that to get him up. And then get your Alakazam. So, you want to be able to play around that. The good thing about this, though, is that you'll see Alakazam. He's got 310 HP, so he's rarely going to be hit. He's rarely going to be one-shotted unless we're going against a dark-type deck. And he only needs 1 energy to retreat. So it makes him, like, even if he does get up there and take a hit, a lot of times you're going to be able to retreat into this Mimikyu again. Or, let me go straight to that, Pecharunt. So Pecharunt is kind of my other way of also increasing our damage. It's kind of a risky one because he does only have 80 HP. And you're going to poison yourself a lot of times at the same time you're poisoning your opponent. So something to think about. But the good thing about him is as long as he's in the active, you're going to put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon during checkup. So if you want to get him out there, and you're going to be dealing 6 5 damage. Oh, I'm sorry, not 6. It's going to be 5 total, right? So you're going to be dealing 50 damage per turn with him in the active, or if you can get your Radiant Hisuian Sneasler on your bench, now we're talking about 2 more, so we can deal 70 damage to our opponent's active Pokemon. So that's pretty solid. And then this is what's really cool, right? I mean, you've got those 2 out there. You've got your Alakazam on the bench, and he can hit for 120. So now, if you're kind of going the route of keeping your Pecharunt in the active rather than the Mimikyu, you can be dealing 70 plus 120 damage from your Alakazam. And now that gets somewhere where we're in a good spot, right? Because a problem with Alakazam is with it only dealing 120, as we see here, especially with all of these like 300 plus HP Pokemon out there, it's going to take us a few turns. We're talking about 3 turns sometimes to knock out their Pokemon. It's at 360 when they've got like 310, 330, and even 340. So don't even tell me about when they're throwing on Heroes Capes and stuff. So I really like that kind of mechanic to it. I have 2 Pecharunts in there, so I've got kind of some options in terms of if I'm going to go Pecharunt or if I'm going to go Mimikyu. Kind of depends on what my opponent's looking like and the other setup, because it does take some setup. Not only do we need the Sneasler on the bench to deal more, but we're also going to need a Brute Bonnet, which I have 2 of these, right? We want to get a Brute Bonnet so that you can throw a Anc Booster Capsule on him, and then we can poison our opponent's Pokemon. Now, another thing to consider, in case I forget to talk about it because I didn't write it down, but you may want to get yourself a Dark Energy in there so you don't necessarily have to rely on the Brute Bonnet. Maybe worth it to get a Dark Energy and just use Poison Chain, and then that way you're able to keep that Pokemon in the active and poison it without using Brute Bonnet. So also something to think about. And this deck could kind of go the route where you don't even use a Brute Bonnet if you wanted to. Something to think about. I thought about it, but I didn't go that route. Anyway, okay, so moving on. So we've talked about those. I'm going a little bit out of order here because I think it works for the mechanics a little bit to give you an idea of what the deck's looking like. Then we've got Natu, right? We've got Natu out here. Obviously, we're not attacking with this one. Or the Xatu either, right? This is our draw engine, and this is also how we're able to get some energies attached so that we always have attackers ready. So Clairvoyant Sense is attaching a basic Psychic Energy to one of your bench. If you do, you draw 2 cards, right? So that's how we're going to really always make sure that we have an Alakazam ready. It's also how we're going to continue to draw. A lot of times, too, something to really think about here is Alakazam is your attacker. He's the only one who really needs to attack. Maybe you want to get some energies on Mimikyu. Maybe you want to get an energy on Xatu in case he gets to the active. But a lot of times what I'm doing to ensure that I keep my draw engine alive, because I know that I can attach an energy and I don't need many, is I'm not even going to attach per turn. I'm only going to be attaching using my Clairvoyant Sense. That way, I can continue to have my draw engine throughout and not like get in a predicament where I don't even have a Psychic Energy in hand for the turn. Then we're not able to draw. So I really want to do that. So really make sure that you're thinking about that when we are going that route. Now let's go through the trainers. We have, of course, the Buddy Poffin. This time I'm only going with 2 of them, mainly because the 2 that I need are Abra and Natu, but then our other ones are Hisuian Sneasler. Pecharunt actually is at 80 HP, so it's 10 too much, and then our Brute Bonnet. So we're actually wanting to get a little bit more nest balls in here, but I think 2 Poffins are a good route to go to at least get our Abra and our Natu on the bench. A lot of times you want to at least have 1 on the bench, so the Poffin's going to get you where you need to be for that. Earthen Vessel, I've got 4 of those just to make sure I'm getting my energies in hand. Sometimes it can get me into trouble having to discard something because there are only 2 copies of a lot of cards in here just to fit everything in. We kind of had to squeeze a lot into this deck. So 4 of them works. Try to go and discard what maybe you don't need. Maybe you've already got a couple Abras on the bench. You can spare 1. And then remember that our Psychic Pokemon, which we'll talk about later, we're able to get some of those back from discard. Nest Ball, so I've got 3 Nest Balls. We need Nest Balls a little bit more here, like I said, to get the Brute Bonnet and Sneasler, as well as Pecharunt if we need. Prime Catcher for the Ace spec. I think this one is the way to go. I considered Hero's Cape, which I don't know. I may swap it out. I honestly haven't played a lot. I initially put in Neutralization Zone before remembering that, oh, that also neutralizes my Alakazam, and I was kind of, I just kept forgetting to switch it out and just kept going into more and more matches and just getting rid of it. So I've been playing this really without an Ace spec for a while. I mean, Neutralization Zone could work if you want to go full on Poison, but this deck is Alakazam, so we don't really, we want to be able to use our Alakazam from the bench. So I think Prime Catcher is good. It helps us be able to swap out if need be, and it also gets our opponent to the Pokemon we want in. Remember things like, if we can deal 70 poison damage in one turn, that's going to one-shot a lot of Stage 1 non-V and EX Pokemon. So a lot of times you may kind of want to go that route to get a cheap kill, or just get their Pokemon in that you want to get rid of, something that's using abilities, things like that. Really kind of play it that route. So Prime Catcher, I think, is the way to go here. Rare Candy. How many Rare Candies do I have? I think I have 2 or 3. 3, sorry. 3 Rare Candies in there. Yeah, I mean, we do want to get our Alakazam out there, and I did only play 1 Kadabra, so you may consider putting a second Kadabra and going 2, but I think Rare Candy, especially because we're using Arven. Ultra Ball, another one of my MOs is just to throw 3 Ultra Balls in there. You're going to see 3 in almost every deck. Give us some options for who we want to grab, especially Alakazam or Xatu is really what we're going to be looking for here. Perilous Jungle. Now there, I talked about having 7. We're able to deal 7 if we've got a Pecharunt and a Sneasler in there. How about 90? How about 90 damage if we're putting 2 more on there with our Perilous Jungle Stadium out there? The downside is it's going to be both yours and your opponent's, so now that's going to up you to taking 30 poison damage per turn, which is going to be a big deal for your Pecharunt and your Mimikyu in the active spot. They're going to get knocked out in 3 turns. However, it's pretty good still because we're able to just KO a lot of Pokemon. I mean, we imagine now dealing 190 with the poison damage plus Alakazam. Now we're about to go up to 210 if we can get this Perilous Jungle out there and you've got a Pecharunt inactive. Right, so and your Pecharunt's going to last 3 turns. You know, thinking about the potential to knock out a couple two prize cards makes this really worth it. I like Perilous Jungle, and then remember that you can retreat your Pokemon pretty easily. All of these guys are 1-cost retreats. Our opponent is probably going to be trying to do something similar, but they're at least going to take some pretty significant damage before they can move that out. So I really like Perilous Jungle here. I am going with 3 of them. Arven is another card that we really need here. It's going to help us get things like our Earthen Vessels to keep our energy in hand. Nest Balls or Poffin, depending on what we need, potentially even Ultra Balls. And then, of course, we really need to pull out those Ancient Booster Capsules so that we can get the poison damage started. So, Arven allows us to do that. We're going to go for Arven's. Boss's Orders, 3. We're going to go with 3 Boss's Orders. Our Prime Catcher helps us kind of have a 4th wave forcing into active, but I'm going to go with 3 here. Now, Tulip. This is one, I wish I could fit 3 into this deck. I just can't. But overall, I think it's solid. Put up to 4, any combination of Psychic Pokemon and Psychic Basic Energy cards from discard into hand. This one, you know, it was in my initial iteration of the deck because there were only Psychics, but do remember that Brute Bonnet and Pecharunt are going to be Dark type, or Shadow type, whatever you want to call them. So keep that in mind if you're using something like an Earthen Vessel or an Ultra Ball to have to discard. Do not discard your Brute Bonnets and your Pecharunts because we are only playing with 2. So do discard your Psychics. You can spare an Abra, an Alakazam, even if you really have to, a Kadabra, especially our Psychic Energies, because we can grab them back up with Tulip. But we cannot grab the Dark Pokemon. I'm not playing any Night Stretchers. I'm not playing any Super Rods. I'm just going with this because it kind of lets us get all that we need in a turn. And make sure that you try to spare this one for when you really need it. You know, if you really have to and you're only going to grab one energy, cool, but then just know that you've got a maximum of one left. You know, that's saying that the other one's not prized. So think about that. Ancient Booster Capsule, another one. I'm only playing 2, and that's risky. But again, this deck needs a lot. You know, there's a lot going on, and maybe I want to kind of eliminate one certain mechanic here. Maybe I want to get rid of Mimikyu and just go full on poison. But I'm gonna go with just 2 here, and so far I've done pretty well with that here. In terms of energy too, let's talk about that real quick. I'm just going to go 10 Psychic Energy, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. For the strategy here, we're going to decide early on, as early as possible. I mean, a lot of times it's going to be based on what your initial draw is, but, you know, based on your opponent's deck, you know, do you want to play Pecharunt or do you want to play a Mimikyu in the active spot? You know, if they're playing full-on EX deck, then you're going to want to probably just stick to the Mimikyu. But if they're playing something that has other attackers other than EXs, you're probably going to want to get the Pecharunt in there, especially if you do happen to get to a 1-prize deck. A lot of times that poison is going to be able to really help you out dealing some damage, and then obviously the Mimikyu is not really going to do much for you if that's the case. So decide on which one you want in the active spot, and then you're going to kind of play from there. From there, a lot of times your next step is going to try to get your Natu evolved into a Xatu. So you want to get the Natu onto the bench, try to evolve as quickly as possible, and then probably get yourself a Brute Bonnet if possible, because we do want to start trying to poison them. Even if we're not having the Pecharunt inactive, with our Sneasler and our Perilous Jungle, we can hit up to 50 damage in a turn with poison. So we do want to get that out there no matter what. So from there, we want to try to poison, like I said, and then get yourselves your Perilous Jungle and your Radiant Sneasler. You know, we do want to at least start the poison damage. If you get your Perilous Jungle and Sneasler out there without being able to poison, they're rather useless. So kind of thinking about it that way. Another thing too is we need a lot of Pokemon. So think about this. We need at least an Abra on the bench. We need a Xatu on the bench. We need a Brute Bonnet on the bench. So that's already 3. So what else are you going to go from there? We need Sneasler on the bench. That's 4. So now you've got one more spot. Do you want to put a Pecharunt? Do you want to have a backup Abra? Do you want to have a second Natu? You're going to have to make some decisions throughout the match and really plan your bench ahead so that you can do things in the right way. So at least you want your Sneasler, Brute Bonnet, Abra, Kadabra, Alakazam, and your Xatu. So that's 4. So what are you going to do for your last one? That's going to be a decision that you have to think about based on your opponent and what deck they are playing, right? And then in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck, there's a lot of flexible ways to minimize and deal damage. Minimizing with your Mimikyu out there. I mean, then minimizing is kind of a debatable word, considering you're kind of maximizing damage because we're poisoning ourselves. But still, you know, we can use Alakazam and poison, and that can really increase the ways that we're able to deal damage with our Alakazam safe on the bench as a 2-prizer. Even if our 1-prizer is poisoned and getting knocked out in 3 turns or something like that, then that's okay. With the Perilous Jungle, really is the only way that's going to increase your poison. From there, it's okay if we're taking 10 damage a turn, even with Mimikyu in the active. He's got 70 HP. You know, he's going to take still a while to knock himself out. It's really got good draw power too with that Natu, and really draw power combined with ability to attach per turn. If you do find yourself with plenty of Psychic Energy in hand, you can attach up to 2 per turn with that ability, which is really a lot for this deck. It does not need a lot of energy attached to Pokemon, so that's another really good strength of this deck, not really mentioned here. Weaknesses though, it needs a lot of Pokemon. You know, like I mentioned, just to get our maximum poison damage out there, we need Sneasler and Brute Bonnet on the bench along with an attacker and our draw power. So we're talking about getting 4 Pokemon before we're really able to maximize this. You can obviously deal damage, and you want to get yourself set up with your Alakazam as quickly as possible, but he's not going to be dealing much. In a pinch, you can get this Alakazam inactive if your opponent is really getting their bench maximized. And think about this, it's dealing 30 for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So now with if you don't forget about that move in terms of this being a strength, because when you're playing against some of these area 0 underdepths and they've got an 8 bench, then maybe you want to actually get this bad boy and make him a main attacker. 2 energy, 3 times 8 is going to deal 240 plus 90. That's going to knock anybody out in one hit. So do not forget about that Mind Jack ability. It has gotten me out of some pinches before, especially if your opponent's going there. So it's just another way to deal damage, and your opponent's probably going to forget about it. They're worried about this dimensional hand, and they're probably even going to try to boss this guy up into the active a lot. So it's happened to me where they boss him up and think, now he's going to have to retreat so he doesn't get knocked out, and then boom, this guy's hitting. Even a regular 5 Pokemon bench, that's 150 plus 90 is 240. That's going to knock out most Pokemon. You talk about getting yourself poisoned too, and they can still deal even more. And Alakazam at 310, he doesn't really care about poison. So this is some good stuff there. But yeah, coming back here, bench space on your end is going to be an issue. Obviously, we can't play Area 0 Underdepths. We don't have a Terra Pokemon here. And the damage overall is a little bit mid. Even with poison, let's say you have your Sneasler out there, you're only going to deal 30 damage. Unless you can get your other one out. So, in a non-ideal world, we're only dealing 150 damage with Sneasler, maybe even 130. So it can be a little bit mid with damage if you're not able to make everything work. And then obviously you're poisoning your own Pokemon. The Perilous Jungle, if you've got a Mimikyu out there, is going to get knocked out in 3 turns with the Perilous Jungle. So thinking about those things, but overall we're still in a good spot. It's still a fun deck, and we're only hitting ourselves for 1 prize a lot of times. Some other cards to consider in this deck. Thinking about Dusknoir, I really thought about that as I was looking through. We are able to put 13 damage counters on one of our Pokemon, our opponents, and that combined with our Mind Hack from Alakazam is going to hit for 250. Sorry, 250. So it's something to think about. It would really change the composition of this deck. You'd probably have to really remove all of the poison and just go full on with that. So I'd be interested in seeing that. If somebody wants to build that deck, let me know in the comments what it looks like within Alakazam and Dusknoir, if it's perhaps viable or not, and then we can see it. I'd be interested in that. I may build that one day on here. Other than that, we don't have too much that I would consider swapping out. TM Devolution is one I used to use a lot in this original iteration of the deck. As our Alakazam's just hitting for 120, many times our opponents are just going to be retreating their Pokemon. And if they are playing a lot of evolution Pokemon, then what I used to do is let them get down to maybe, they'd retreat 2 or 3 or something like that, where I think I'm in a good spot, and then boom, devolve them, and then I can at least get, 2 or 3 prize cards for free, and just kind of take out multiple of their attackers in one turn. So that one's solid, but I just didn't see it fitting anymore in this deck. It's tempting. I mean, it's tempting to maybe just get rid of something in here, like maybe if we could get rid of the Brute Bonnets and just add a Shadow or Dark Energy so that our Pecharunt poisons. But it kind of hamstrings us. So again, it just didn't fit, so I took it out. Neutralization Zone, it's one that's, despite it stops our Alakazam from attacking, because we're preventing all damage done to all Pokemon that don't have a rule box by attacks from EX and Vs, right? Or anyone with the rule box. Let me see. All that don't. Okay, yeah, because I was interested in the Radiants because they have a rule box. So anyway, it's one to consider if we really want to, if we're doing good with poison and don't need to maybe attack with our Alakazam. But it's so situational that I just removed it. I think that we're much better off with a Prime Catcher or even a Hero's Cape, right? A Hero's Cape is one that it's really borderline if we want that, because we are putting in a lot of basics. A lot of basics that are low HP. We're using poison. If we can get them a Hero's Cape slapped onto them, then it really helps us out because we're really able to then increase them by 100. They're going to be able to take much more poison damage, especially with the Perilous Jungle in there. So I'm on the fence, really, like if I want Hero's Cape over the Prime Catcher, but for now I'm going with the Prime. Another one to think about too is the Luxurious Cape. You know, we are, same thing, our Pecharunt, we've got a Mimikyu out there, and they're able to take some damage, right? Especially the Mimikyu, considering it's not going to be able to be taking damage from any big EXs and Vs. You know, the Luxurious Cape gives us 100 more HP without it being an A-spec, but the downside is that they do take one more prize card for knocking it out. So it's something to think about in there. Like if we think that maybe to a Mimikyu, I think it wouldn't be the best thing to attach to a Pecharunt. It's only getting the Pecharunt up to 180 HP. So getting knocked out for 180 and then them taking 2 prize cards is pretty bad. You know, they can do that. But maybe for our Mimikyu, if you wanted to take that chance, it may be worth it. Now, a kind of in between these two is just the Bravery Charm. That's going to give us 50 extra HP, which is going to help us survive the poison. Hopefully, sometimes they won't get one shot, and it's not going to cost us another prize card. So really, that's kind of what we're playing with is, you know, our HP here. Can we get some of these basics because we want either Pecharunt or Mimikyu inactive? What do we want to do to get them some more HP, to give them some more survivability for us? Other than that, I would just think about like plussing or minusing some of the regular cards that we already have in the deck so that we can increase. You know, it'd be nice to do things like increase our Tulip or increase other cards in the deck like the Brute Bonnets or the Ancient Boosters. You know, how are we going to work around that? So think about those types of ways, and again, let me know in the comments what you think. You know, what should we plus or minus that we already have in this deck in order to get it to our optimal state and really make it more consistent to play, because that's kind of the weakness right now sometimes, is because of the 2 copies of cards we can have some inconsistencies in terms of what we're drawing. Well, that will do it for us for this episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Thank you for joining. I am Ryan, as you all know. I hope you know by now. I mean, I mentioned it early, but I'm bad with names, so maybe you are too. Anyway, if you liked what you saw, please hit that subscribe button so you can become part of the Hawks Nest. We are a growing flock of fabulous folks. We just love to do what we love. We're passionate about it. Love to do it well. If you're not ready to fly yet, just hit that like button. Will show up in an algorithm near you. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of this deck. Are we going to do well when we take it to TCG Live? You're going to have to watch to find out. But hey, let me know in the comments what you think if it is going to do well. Until then, though, we'll see you next time.